Hello everyone. In this video we are going to see how new Analytics Center facilitates reporting and dashboarding against data entities. With the new Analytics Center, there is native support for data entity so that you do not have to go to your DBA for giving access to a particular user. Entity owners can manage access to data entities and who can report against which fields and which entities right from within their browser. So let's look at this in action. So before I show you how this is set up using your browser, I'm going to go to settings. Now this is typically an area only administrators would have access to, but I'm going to show you how this changes as entity owner is giving people permission. So I'm going to go to analytics settings, role setup, and I have a role created called demo. Now this is a custom role. By default, administrators would have access to all the entities and they can report against any entity, but any of the other roles, including the custom role, I can control the permissions. So let's look at it. I have various data sources, and if I drill down into the data entities data source, right now it says it has 41 tables, that is 41 entities, and none of them is available for this role for reporting or dashboarding within the Analytics Center. I'm going to open Build Apps in a new tab. If I go to Data Entities, I'm going to add a new entity. Let's call it Agile Point. I'm going to add it to Administration category. The unique record field name, I'm going to use name over here. And if I scroll all the way to the bottom of the screen, there is a new setting you will find, Enable Analytics. By default, this field is enabled. That means you can report and create dashboard against these entities within the Analytics Center. You can always disable it, which I'm going to disable later in my demo. So by default, it is enabled. I'm going to go ahead and click Create Entity. I'm going to start adding some of the fields over here. I'm going to say add a date field. Maybe a phone field. And as you can see, by default, because analytics is enabled at the entity level, it is also enabled on the corresponding field level, and it is checked by default. We can turn it off, which I'm going to do when as second part of my demo. I'm going to just keep it enabled for now, and I'm going to add one more, maybe a text area, and call it address. So as of now, I have 4 custom fields and 5 standard fields which are available. Now as an entity owner, once I'm done setting up my initial fields in my entity, I can go to security, and you'll see there is a new permission group over here called analytics. If I click on this one, this permission group works a little bit differently from the remaining 6. The remaining 6, they work on users and groups, whereas the analytics one works on the role level itself to keep it simple during the synchronization. So that note is already made available over here. What I'm going to do is, it is listing down all the roles which are available within Agile Point. I'm going to say, for this particular entity, give people belonging to demo role and application designer role permission to report and create dashboard against this within the Analytics Center. I'm going to go ahead and click Save. Once this is done, as an entity owner, all I have to do is click on the Sync Analytics option. What this does is, it takes the metadata of the current entity and synchronizes this with the analytics database so that it is available for creating reports and dashboards. Now I could have done it as you were adding fields, but that would have been bad for performance, as you are making multiple changes every time if it is going and getting synchronized. So what we have done is, we have taken an approach that once the entity owner feels that okay, he is done with his changes, you can just get over here and say Sync Analytics. Click yes. It says that it might take up to 2 minutes for this change to reflect within the Analytics Center. If I go back to Analytics Center and click refresh, go to role setup, demo role. If I go to data entities, data source, you see now there is one more table. There are 42 tables now, and one of them is available for people to report, people belonging to this role to create reports or dashboards, and that is Agile Point entity, which I just now created, and all the fields are right now available for the user to report or create dashboards around this. Now I'm going to go back to data entities module, and I'm going to go to fields, and I'm going to add a new field. Let's call it email. Now I'm going to knowingly disable analytics on this field. So I might have a situation where I have a table with 10 fields and I want to allow only 6 of them to be reported against. I don't want all of them to be showing up in my analytics metadata. So I can do that kind of setting as well as an entity owner. So I went ahead and said disable analytics for this particular field and click save. Now once I'm done with my change, again go and say sync analytics. It might take a couple of minutes to sync with the analytics metadata database. I'm going to refresh it. If I go to role setup at this point of time, what you will observe is the email field did not show up in the metadata for the Analytics Center. That's because I indicated that do not make it available within the Analytics Center. I'm going to go back, open this field again, put it in edit mode and say now enable analytics for this field. I'm going to close this and say sync analytics. Now if I go back to my analytics settings, hit a refresh button. And if I go to role setup, under demo, what you see is the email field starts showing up over here. That means now the user can create reports and dashboard against the email field as well. That's available to him within the Analytics Center. Now if I go back, so as you saw that as I'm making changes to my entity, whether I'm adding fields, I'm editing them, I can precisely control which fields can be reported against. Now what if I wanted to disable the Analytics Center access for this particular entity? I can go back to details, put it in edit mode, scroll all the way to the bottom and say switch this off, enable analytics. Now I'm turning off analytics on this particular entity. I'm going to go ahead and click update. Now once I do that, one thing you will notice is that the sync analytics option has been grayed out. Now once I'm done with these changes, if I go back to analytics settings, do a refresh, go to role setup, under demo, under data entity, what you see is now there are only 41 tables. So that entity called Agile Point got removed from my metadata and I can no longer use it in Analytics Center. So with this, as you can see, without involving a DBA, right from within my browser, I could precisely control which fields from which entity can be used in reports and dashboards. Thanks a lot for your time.